Welcome back to what will be the Frugal Gardener's Plant Dome. This is part 2 of how to grow your vegetables in the winter without buying a greenhouse. So, on part 1, we laid down 2 barriers, which I won't go over again because it's in the first video. So we're moving on to part 2, which is obviously the cover, the top. Just like there's 2 layers on the bottom, there are going to be 2 layers on the top. But before I go any further, just want to say I'm kind of pleasantly surprised at the response that I've gotten from friends and relatives for part 1. I didn't think people would be that interested in gardening in the winter, but I guess with the food prices being the way they are and what happened a few years ago with the coronavirus, people are starting to pay more attention. So there's going to be another part after this, and then there are going to be updates throughout the winter. So if you're interested, hit that bell, or if you haven't subscribed, please subscribe because there are more videos on the way. So I have approximately 25 containers and pots in here. It's a very windy day. In the first video, you will notice that I had posts and bottles on the corners. I decided to skip those. And the reason is, well, there are a couple of reasons. These are the bottles that you saw in the first video. Reason number 1 is the height. You can see this is a windy day, a very windy day. And obviously, when you have posts and you put any kind of material over them, it's going to act as a sail, which means it's going to be more difficult to keep standing. I don't really need these to be, 4 feet tall. Most of what I'm growing, which I'll get into in part 3, are not going to be that tall. So what I decided to do was use this as my centerpiece. This is a milk crate, and I put a tall container on the top. I'm going to pretty it up after a while. Once it's all done, you'll see, but right now I'm just getting it set up so that you'll understand the principle and how things work. I'll give you an example. When this is fully covered, this is the plastic that's going to go over top of all of this whole thing. This is what's going to keep the heat in the winter. When this is all the way covered, it's going to be down over here, but you have to make sure that it's on top of this black plastic. If you have this on the outside, then you could have a problem, especially if you're on a slope, because rain, water, snow is going to get inside. If you have it covered where that can't happen, then you have a seal. Think of this as a house in the wintertime. When you are in an area where it gets cold, you have to have a roof, and you also want to make sure your windows are closed. So that's what we're doing with this dome. This dome is not what I would normally use. This is actual plastic. I'll put a link in the bottom of this video to show you where you can get what kind I'm using, first of all, and where you can pick it up from. I normally would buy greenhouse material, but I've been doing this for a while, and the greenhouse material, the prices have gotten ridiculous. So this is an example of what it's going to look like when it's covered. I'm not going to cover it now because I'm one-handing it, but basically this is 6-ply. The plyness is the thickness. So you have 2-ply, 4-ply, and 6-ply. I'm going to stop right here to explain something to people. This is not going to be as difficult as a project as you think. Probably 90% of the time. I'm in zone 6B. If you're in zone 6 or even warmer, you're only going to have a handful of days when the weather is really crappy. Most of what you're going to grow can survive below freezing temperatures, especially if it's not for a long period of time. So a lot of what you see here is going to be for those handful of nights when the temperature does drop into the teens, does drop into single digits, does drop down to maybe 0 or -0 for a short period of time. That's all it takes to kill your roots, to kill your leaves, and this is what we're trying to prevent. So most of the time, it's probably not even going to be an issue. Now, once this is covered, you still are going to have to monitor it, which is, again, it's not that difficult. And what I mean by monitor it is, I came out here the other day. I actually had this covered. And when I came out, what happened was when I took the cover off, the heat build up, you could feel the warmth coming out. Because everything that we did in the first video with all the plastic containers, the plastic flooring, the plastic bottles, all of that stuff heated up during the day, and it helped keep this whole dome warm. This is an example of what I use to, I need to change the battery in this, but the bottom line is I check this at least twice a day. It's kind of second nature to me at this point. There, okay. So, you want Fahrenheit, you'll see the F up here. I'm not recommending any particular brand. So it's 69 degrees under this dome right now. This stays upstairs or in the house somewhere, and it's reading from this. So you change the batteries every couple of months. This is the smaller version. I need to change the batteries in that, but you get the idea. You can check your temperature inside here anytime, day or night, without leaving your house. So it's pretty cool and pretty simple. If you forget and you have a warm day, if it's warm outside, it's going to be hot underneath here. This frost cloth will add approximately 5 degrees heat to your dome, your heat dome. Now, again, this ply, you can get 2-ply, and you might be able to get away with it, but on those real cold nights, you're going to probably wish you had gotten a 6-ply. This is, as I mentioned earlier, plastic. I prefer to use greenhouse plastic, but I think this cost me around $30 for this size. You will, if you go to Amazon anyway, it'll give you different sizes, and you can measure it out and buy the size you need. Now, for greenhouse plastic for this size, it would cost me over $100. This whole project is probably going to cost me about half that. I mean, the tablecloth was less than $10, and the frost cloth, well, I already had, but those are pretty cheap. So it's not going to cost you a lot of money. So basically, in the morning, before you go to work or school or whatever it is, get the children off to school, you check your temperature. If it's going to be hot, you do something called venting, where you just take the plastic off. You take this can actually probably stay. You take off the plastic, you push it back, let the hot air out or in, depending upon what the temperature is outside, and then in the evening, you cover it back up again. It's very simple. The other thing you need to know about is basically making sure that you have a way for the runoff. In other words, you want a pitch, just like you do for a roof. If you do not, now see, this may be a little bit of a concern for me, but I'm going to move a few things around so that when it rains, when it snows, when you have ice, when you have freeze-ups, see, this is what I mean about the wind. You don't want that piling up on the top of your dome because it's going to crush everything down and it's going to make a mess, and it might even, if it sits overnight, it might even kill your plants. So you want to have some sort of pitch, some sort of angle where the snow and the ice and the rain just sheds off from the top. There's really not a lot that you have to remember when it comes to this. One other thing is watering. You don't want to overwater because water is going to bring condensation, and when that water builds up underneath this plastic, then you may have a problem trying to keep this puppy warm. There is something I want to discuss about what happens when you don't have any sun for long periods of time, or when you do have extended periods of cold, but I don't want to get too deep into that right now. I'll save that for the third and final video. But right now, you're good to go. If you have the two barriers underneath, which is the plastic and the dark tablecloth, and you have the dome, which is, you don't even really have to have the frost cloth. I like to use it. It gives me a little extra added protection. And plus, on days like today when I don't have the dome up, it keeps the birds and the squirrels out of my plants. But tonight, I will probably cover this up. It'll give me some extra heat, and that's it. I mean, you're pretty much good to go after that. People think this is complicated. There is one more thing that I wanted to mention, and that is leaf burn. People call it by different names, but what it basically boils down to is when it gets really cold outside, you don't want your leaves actually touching this if you can help it. Now, if you're growing let's say carrots, or if you're growing onions, if you're growing garlic, it doesn't really matter. If you're growing something large like collard greens that's going to spread out and take up more room, then you want to be conscious of that. So there's ways you can just add some height to your garden, your dome garden, without going through a whole lot of trouble. Just takes a little bit of ingenuity, but like I said at the beginning of this video, I did not want to make this too high. You use more material, it's harder to heat, it costs more money, and you run the risk of the wind. So right now, we're looking good. This is actually ready to go. So part 3, I'm going to show you what I'm going to plant, because that's another thing, another misconception that people have, and they think, oh, it's going to be cold, everything's going to die. Nope. A lot of things like cabbage, like collard greens, like spinach, like lettuce, that stuff can survive in cold temperatures, but this is more of an insurance policy. So that's it for today. I want to thank you guys again, and if you have any questions, I don't care what they are, you can post them below. And the last thing I wanted to say is, if you do like the video, please give it a thumbs up, because it helps me to know whether people are actually interested in this kind of content. Well, the sun's out. That's a good sign. I'm going to sign off now. Thank you guys for spending part of your day with me. And remember, when you grow your own food, you'll always know where it comes from. Catch you guys for part 3 in a few days.